Testing. Hi, thank you for waiting. So my surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. Supposed to get there at 5:30. I'm real happy about that. For the next 2 weeks, this week and next week, I will not be here. So you do not have to come into office. I will send you chapter 6, which is the marketing program. I will send you a video of that. It is a very deep, involved chapter. We might get to some of it like product today, but you'll have a recording and hopefully I should be back. Let's see, check. Let's see, give me a schedule here, please. Go. I will probably be back sometime around February 4th. Okay. In the meantime, you can keep up with me in emails and we will continue. There will be no test until I'm back fully in class. Okay. All right, good. So this is the part where we start talking about basic concepts of marketing, which will be expanded as we go along. So the most basic concept, we did the definition of what marketing is, and now we basically talk about what is the concept of what a market is. Quite simply, it's buyers and sellers that are met in a common area or a group of institutions with individuals with similar needs that can be met by a specific product. And the product, of course, can be a service, an experience, anything we wish to have, but those particular needs kind of encapsulates and bring those individuals together in a common group that allows us to be able to identify their needs and hopefully provide for them. The market space is basically the electronic marketplace, which is unbound by time and space. That, of course, has its own issues with a concept. I can give you one, the endless aisle. Quite simply, where does the end of the aisle happen when we're trying to do a search and what is considered significant within the group? 80% of all searches, by the way, never get past the first page. So if you work on market spaces and you desire yourself to be well seen, you got to find your way to get onto that first page. And then finally, a meta market is a cluster of closely related goods and services that are around a particular consumption activity. And so one of those consumption activities certainly that has happened right now is skiing. And so all of those goods and services related generically around skiing, whether you're talking about Beach Mountain, whether you're talking about Appalachian ski, whether you're talking about the rental, whether you're talking about the sales, whether you're talking about the support of the service, that in essence is a cluster of closely related groups and services that center around that one particular consumption activity. And the desire in a meta market is to become the expert. That individual who is associated with an understanding and an experience of those particular interactivities that people trust, that those individuals are authentic. And so when you define whatever the market is that you wish to be in, the first thing you want to do is be able to understand that market from both the consumer side and the product side as well. So a metamediary is a single access point where buyers can contact many other sources. One of the unique things that has been brought about by the internet that used to be known worldwide is the concept of a syndication. And so syndications, for the lack of a better word, were a one-stop shop for being able to find particular industrial goods. And I can give the classic example, cartoons, all right? Cartoons inside of newspapers that were printed every day were run by syndications. They were single access points, whether they were King Features or multiple others, where different sellers in the meta market can come together and where the buyers can come together at the same point. Metamediaries, once again, are rare because single access points don't exist much anymore because there's so many other ways that we can interact with the particular goods that we have. And so these are the basic concepts that wrap themselves around the concept of market. So these are particular ones, automotive. Once again, these are what we would call syndications. In its classic sense, these are, in essence, gathering points of groups and individuals who get together. Anyone gotten into home ownership yet? Oh, I shouldn't say good luck. God, my first mortgage was $28,000. The first mortgage I ever had was $289 a month. Can't imagine what it must be, the difficulties you have. I hope those prices go down. But just give you an idea, it's a common group or area where a collection of participants can come together, okay? So let's talk about definitions that are required for us to understand some things about marketing. So in 1776, along with everything else going on with the Declaration of Independence, we had this particular Scottish philosopher who came out with a book called The Wealth of Nations. Wealth of Nations was a product that was actually written in conjunction with other individuals in France, in the United States, and in Scotland himself. What did the Wealth of Nations say? Wealth of Nations said that the wealth in a nation is not centered around the resources that they sell. The wealth of a nation is in the talents and assets of the individuals who work with inside the countries themselves. Before Wealth of Nations, which was a paradigm change, property was considered to be static and seized. Wealth tended to be fixed in its nature. One of the unique things that happened in the 18th century, which is also known as the Enlightenment in many ways, is the beauty of different ideas being tossed back and forth across the continents. And so if I were to look up Wealth of Nations, and you were to actually look at this information from Adam Smith, you'll find that Adam Smith had all sorts of interesting pen pals as well. Thomas Jefferson was one, Benjamin Franklin was another, Voltaire, many of the other philosophers at this time, because of the weakness of the monarchies that were around, had this ability to toss around great ideas. And so what he said was, he said that the best thing that a nation can do is allow its citizens to achieve whatever is the best within them. Allow the citizens within that country to receive money and payment for whatever they do best, and let them take that money and exchange that money for other goods and services performed by other individuals who are performing at their best. It was, once again, a paradigm shift in the way that we think, in that nations no longer were grouped around the resources that they had, which were valuable, don't get me wrong, but around the wealth of the individuals within that country. And so one of the things that Adam Smith said, that it is valuable and is important, is to set up ideas on conditions of exchange. And so these come directly from Wealth of Nations. An exchange is the process of obtaining something of value by offering something of value in return. I offer my experiences, and for those experiences, you will give me money. I will take that money and I will go exchange it with another worker whose talents they are using. And so this is where the exchange economy comes up. In essence, we talking about the exchange economy right at this point in 1776. And so Adam Smith put together conditions. One condition is there must be two parties for the exchange to take place. The second is that each party should have something that the other party values, and that also means equal or greater value. Now, as we talked about before, value is one of those things that's very subjective. And many times we can't understand why another individual values something over another, but it's a very personal thing. And then the last was probably the most invaluable, especially when we're talking about free countries, is that each party must be able to communicate, deliver, and the last one that is not in here is that you must be able to freely back out. If you can't back out, it is not an exchange, it is coercion. And so with these basic rules in step, if they are exchanging things of value, then now we have to define what are the things that they are exchanging. And so, excuse me, there they are. Each party must be free to accept or reject the change, and that each party must believe it is desirable to exchange with the other party. It seems simple 300 years from now that we all get what they're exactly, but you really have no idea how revolutionary this was. I mean, in essence, human beings were chattel, and that they, in essence, were to be used by the state. And what this is saying is, no, you're wrong. That if you really want to value your country, what you do need to do is allow the individuals the freedom for they themselves to achieve. And so this is where exchanges come from. And so now we know and we're moving to the concept of a product. A product is what is acquired through the exchange to satisfy a need or a want. And a product is very generic. We tend to think of it as a fixed or physical item, but it doesn't have to be, and we've expanded those ideas long ago. We'll talk about goods and services and their differences, but we also have to realize is that ideas and information and experiences are just as valued as any physical good. And for anybody who does gaming or any of the hyper realities, just living in any kind of 3D world, those kind of experiences, which in essence has no physical existence whatsoever, is even more difficult to determine whether or not it's valued or not. And so at its most basic, products are something that consumers need or want. Now, they didn't really talk about needs and wants in the book, or excuse me, in these slides. And so now I'm going to define them for you. Needs and wants have very distinct psychological definitions. And so the first is to understand what a need is, all right? A need. Boy, I'm hoping with all these that at least one of them right. We'll find out. So, need comes to us from psychology. And here's my very ugly stick figure. And psychology recognizes that we live many times in two states. One of them is called the actual state, which is where we are now, and the other is what's known as the desired state. Now, what need is by definition from psychology is it is the difference between the actual state and the desired state. Need is the difference between the actual state and the desired state. Needs tend to be vague, unspecific, and if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of need and you believe it, they are hierarchical in structure. And that the most basic needs, the need for food, the need for shelter, the need for safety and security, that those needs must necessarily be met before you can move up to the higher states. Take it for what it's worth. So it's important to understand needs tend to be vague. I'm hungry. I'm tired. Right? There's the recognition that your actual state is not as important, or let's just say is not as ideal as the desired state. It is this pull in the actual state to fulfill the desired state that is known as motivation. And so how the consumer or the individual feels the pull to fulfill themselves in the desired state determines the motivation for us to actually go out and do things. And so what we try to do, or what we attempt to do in marketing, is to help along with the motivation by allowing the consumer to picture themselves in the desired state. In beer commercials, you don't have to talk about the taste of beer because everybody knows what beer tastes like. But what they will do is they will show consumers in the desired state, being with friends, having a drink, enjoying life. Those are the messages that good marketing shows. Usually things like great taste, all of those other things usually happen at the introductory stages of any particular product. Once you move into the maturity, you don't necessarily have to invoke those things anymore. You might do it for simply nostalgia state. But what you want to do is you want to try to get the consumer to picture themselves in that desired state and then provide them with motivation to achieve it. And so that's what a need is. What is a want? A want, put it over here. A want is a desire for something specific. A desire for something specific. I really like an amber. I really do like any of those that you might think of. I want that, and I want that thing and no other. I want to go to A and B. I want to get this particular brew because that's been my favorite. And though I've been triggered from the actual to the desired state, the ultimate answer, the satisfaction to achieve it, is that very important thing that you want. And so these are the differences between needs and between wants. So there was a mathematician and an economist by the name of Thaler. And in 1984, he wrote some very interesting things about what the concept of utility is. Now, I'm not a fan of utility as a definition, but then again, you're going to need this for your test. So I suggest you understand it. Thaler was a mathematician. And so mathematicians, once again, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. All right. Thaler believed that you could calculate or basically add up the goods and the bads and come up with some kind of mathematical formula about how to identify value. Once again, he was an economist. And his work was good because it helped us to define certain things. One of those was the concepts of utility. And utility is the ability of a product to satisfy a customer's need or want. Utility are those things that the product delivers that creates overall greater satisfaction. Whether or not it achieves value, that's not necessarily in this equation, but its ability to bring satisfaction is ultimately its greatest purpose. So what is farm utility? So every supply chain individual understands farm utility is the ability to take a product and create attributes within the product that make it even more desirable. And in essence, you can change it. You can mold it into something different. And it increases in value. So anybody can eat pudding and vanilla wafers and bananas, but if you have an artist who can really make banana pudding, you have found something of great wealth. That is an example of farm utility, taking those goods and changing them into something of greater value. Product or time utility is making the good available when the customer wants it. And so examples of this, especially in convenience stores, are goods or places that are open 24/7. Place utility is making it where customers want it to be. And so it's at the right place at the right time. Any good rental location for renting a suit or a tux, this is an example of place utility. And yes, you combine time and place together, and they ultimately create that, well, once again, satisfaction with each one. So, anybody ever buy a car yet? Go to a dealership. You bought one? Where? Just curious.
Colorado.
Okay. Did you go to an individual or was it like at a dealership?
It's a dealership.
Okay. Did you already know which one you wanted and bought it online, or how did it happen?
I knew what I wanted, but no one had the one I wanted, so I had to go kind of shop around and look at ones
Okay.
that were like the next best.
Okay. And did you find them at that place? Or,
Yeah,
okay. Did you go there with a vehicle you wanted to trade?
yeah.
Did they ask if you wanted to take the new vehicle home for the weekend?
They did not do that.
Okay, that's surprising.
Yeah.
Okay, because usually the first move of any good one is, why don't you go take that one home? You know, just try it out for the weekend. All right. What would happen is this is you would go try it out for the weekend. They would take your car, they would go ahead and run it through. And by Monday, what you would have is when you brought in the car, they would have the contracts all ready for you at a price that's, did they find a price that was reasonable?
Yeah, they found a price that was reasonable. I would say the gnarliest part is all the insurance.
Yes.
That
Yes.
was gnarly. I wasn't ready for that.
Oh, God, yes, insurance is tough.
That was crazy.
Did they have an insurance solution there for you, or did you have to shop?
They had like one that came with the car.
Right.
So there's like so many miles, and then they were trying to sell me on everything.
Okay.
Past that.
Okay. Yeah, that's what happens. Okay. This whole part is they want to get you the car as fast as they can. They want you to own it, love it, be happy with it in any way they can, and smooth the wheels as possibly can. Insurance is always the one thing that doesn't quite fit in their kind of spectrum. But what they want you to do is, in essence, be in love with the vehicle and own it before you ever get out. And that's what possession is, utility is. Just an easy transfer to facilitate the process to basically to achieve that, what you're hoping to have, okay? And the last is psychological utility. And this is where the product provides a positive attributes that the customer finds satisfying. And psychological attributes and like that are so connected to the products. You identify yourselves with the products you have. The products basically are a signature as much as the clothes that you wear. And so you want to be seen with the products that you're using. Apple was the first one to put their logos upside down on their laptops. And then everybody else figured out, hey, that's a great idea. We know a good one when we steal one. And they started doing the same thing. It is a pride of ownership, or the idea that you're owning this, that you're a part of something bigger, that the psychological utility is all about. And there's that old saying, you don't get a second chance at a first impression. And so everything is desired to move towards that goal. We went to Charlotte for the weekend. My daughter had a cheer competition, and I forgot which mall we were at, but going by, it was an Apple store. And the Apple store must have had 200 people in it, easy, no doubt about it. And this positive experiential attribute of just being in an Apple store is enough to make people want to buy things. Apple stores have the highest per capita generated revenue per square inch of any retail outlets in the world. And that includes those tiny diamond merchant stores that are as big as a postage stamp. Apple generates more revenue from square inch than anyone in the world. They pay their people salary, but they give them nice titles. Anyway. So there are two ways of thinking when you're going to start planning. Planning is done strategically and tactically. If I am a football team, my strategy is to achieve a bowl bid. I have this strategy that through my season, I'm going to get recognition with a bowl game. Tactically, I know that in order to strategically achieve this, I must tactically go after each game at a time. Game 1, game 2, game 3, game 4. Each game is required to be able to achieve that overall success. And so the strategy is the overall game plan for success. How do I go about doing that? The tactical planning is that I focus on particular markets or segments and programs for each one of those particular segments that achieves the overall goal of marketing strategy. Disney in 2010, 2012, when Bob Iger was there, their goal was to become the #1 producer and originator of streaming content in the world. That was the overall plan of success. The tactics was he was going to go out and buy him. All right. So he starts with the Marvel Universe. He moves on and gets Pixar. Along the way, they bring over ESPN and ABC. And then they start creating Disney Plus, and then they start making their own. But then they start continually buying other ones along the way. And so this is the tactics of planning while considering the overall strategy. But realize this, there has to be strategy first. Remember what I said in the last recording, in order for Henry Ford to make his great dream, his dream was always the $500 car first. That is what you do. If any of you are going out to try to achieve success, I would urge you first to picture yourself in the success that you wish and desire. Think in yourself, this is it. I have hit success. This is everything that I've ever cared about. And think of that goal first and put yourself in there. That's your strategy. That's where you want to be. Tactics are going to be, how do I get there? I'm going to go to this class. I'm going to listen to Dr. Shao's drone on. I'm going to try to listen hard. And I'm going to achieve good grades as I go through. These are the differences between strategy and tactics. And ultimately, putting together this plan in marketing is what's called a marketing plan. The outlining of the program and the details about how you're going to go out and achieve success. How do we make good choices? I, I, I've talked every once in a while with businesses, and they talk to me about what they're hoping to achieve. And my first question I always ask to them is, I ask them, what does the research say? And usually, not surprisingly, they say, well, we haven't really done any research. Well, the difficulty with that is that if you don't know where you are, anywhere you go will get you. So what you hope to do is have an understanding of where you are in any moment in time. And so these are things that you will be performing when you will be putting together your marketing plan. We have to know what's going on inside our businesses, understand what our strengths are, where our limitations are, whether we can achieve things in the future or whether we're going to need to be able to have more assets. That's what an internal analysis is. You analyze the firm's current future performance. What strategies do we have to achieve and sustain ourselves through the times? Where are our limited resources best used? And folks, everybody's got limited resources. You can't simply blow money forever. Disney. Eventually, he catches up with you. So I look inside myself and I understand where I am. That's what internal analysis is. The next thing is I study my competitors. I love my competitors. My competitors make me harder and stronger. I look at my competitors and I compare myself with them and I create something unique because I don't want to do what my competitors do. I want to do it different and better. So I look at myself, I look at my competitors, and I look at the environment that I am in. How do I know the difference between an internal analysis and environmental analysis? If something is going on, how do I know which is the difference? Quite simply, if I can change it, then it's something internal. If I have no ability to change this particular thing, it is an external influence. And I must be able to prepare myself for it and be able to compensate for weaknesses. This entire thing, what you will be doing, the internal analysis, the external analysis, and the analysis of my competitors all falls under what's known as the situation analysis. It is my ability to collect the internal, the competitive, and the environmental information, bring it together, and come up with some cohesive idea. How do you do this? We will be doing this process in the class, but I'm gonna give you a taste of it. It comes off of two words, one of them which is synthesis, and the other which is known as diagnosis. So these both have Latin roots. Synthesis means to take apart. And diagnosis means to put together. And so what does this mean? I look at something and I'm trying to understand it. Synthesis means that I will take out this particular thing. I will try to look at its component parts individually, try to understand them one piece at a time. Excuse me, flip it, sorry. Diagnosis is to take apart. I don't know what I'm thinking. I'm thinking of my surgery tomorrow. Diagnosis means to take apart, forgive me. And synthesis means to put together. I'm already in the hospital, good. Okay, put together, my bad, okay. Diagnosis means you take everything out. Just think about diagnostics. Diagnostics means you break down everything to its smallest components. Synthesis means you put everything back together and see their relationships to each other. And that's what we're going to be doing when you're going to be doing analysis. We have a great example in here about a Business Week article, and I'll show you exactly what I mean by this. It's all in the doing. And once you do this, You're gonna have a plan and a way to be able to do this for anything. Yes,
Could you provide some examples on the differences between like an internal analysis and the external analysis, and the things that we actually consider to be internal and external? Where's the line in the sand?
great idea. So my particular customers really like my customer service. They like the fact that I go out and I go check on them and take care of them in those particular ways. That is something, an internal strength that I have that makes me unique. My competitors could be doing the exact same thing. I'm not sure. But I can't measure that until I know exactly what are my strengths. I don't want to talk about Tesla because it's one of those things when, especially when it comes to internal analysis. What do you do well? Okay, I mean, you can just break it down to that simple. What do you do well? That is an internal analysis. What if you have a great organization? I'll give you a great one. Philip Morris, okay? RJR Nabisco. So, RJR, which was which was a tobacco in North Carolina in 1996. There was a justice decision in which the American cigarette manufacturers had to pay $962 billion to individuals, and this was kind of a settlement for like 40 years of basically covering up cancer's, worst attributes. So RJR comes out, and these are the people who make Salem and Winston cigarettes, and they're going, well, what do we do? I mean, we're certainly not going to be able to continue, expecting that the cigarette industry is going to be so great. So what do we do? So RJR did an internal analysis, and they realized they did really consumer products well. They marketed well. They did a good job at advertisements. These are advantages and strengths. Now, how do I be able to take those particular goods and use them for something else? Now that I understand my internal capabilities, I'm good at consumer products, I'm going to go buy Nabisco. They buy Nabisco. They start investing themselves in the products, and that they become RJR Nabisco. And now we have an example of where internal analysis has spun itself into a new field. Another example, Pepsi. So the Pepsi wars against Coke from from the beginning when Pepsi started in the 40s till the mid 80s when the Pepsi Challenge came along. Pepsi and Coke were always at war with each other. Coke made a ridiculous decision about doing research and changing the taste of Coke, which is one of the great kerfuffles of all time. But Pepsi simply could not beat Coke. How do we do it? Competitively, quite simply, Coke was too strong. Externally, the external environment for soft drinks at that time was a very crowded market, and Pepsi could not get past third. So what do? Pepsi goes back, does an internal analysis of what their competitive abilities are. They find that they're very good, once again, at product placements and those kind of things, but they do excellent at being able to do things like fusions of different kinds of soft drinks and those kind of things. They did Pepsi Clear and a bunch of other things. So Pepsi as a corporation goes out and buys KFC. They buy Taco Bell. They buy Pizza Hut. They buy A&W Root Beer. They buy Long John Silver's, and they buy Taco Bell. I said say Taco Bell. Anyway, they started creating these fusion stores. They put two of them together. They were spun off an entire group called WOW. I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's the name of it. But this is an entirely separate division that now Pepsi runs that is totally independent and separate. By doing the internal analysis, they looked at what their strengths are, and now they have an entire genre that they own because they were able to know what they do best and how they were able to. I love Coke. but if you're gonna ask me who to work for, I'd rather work for Pepsi. Gatorade was up for sale. Gatorade. 85% of the power drink that drink market is owned by Gatorade. Gatorade goes up for sale, and Coke doesn't even put in a bid. You know, they have Powerade, it's got 12% of the market. Whoop, big whoop. Gatorade owns the market, and they don't even put in a bid to compete with Pepsi. That's a kind of. So if I were to do internal analysis on Coke, I would say they're a bunch of old fogies that don't understand where they are and where they're going. Now, don't get me wrong, they kill on nostalgia because that's their internal analysis says that's what they do best. But nobody, at some point, there's no reason to, once again, compete on Coke. So what they do is they bring these slices of life, show you the desired state where you want to be, and that's how they achieve success. So the curve, what is their performance? What do they do best? Do they have great people that work for him? Do you have a significant resource step, which I will say Tesla has been able to secure lithium supplies like no other business, but that's not Tesla's number one power, okay? And if you're going to take Tesla, you're going to have to tell me what it is. Anyway, did that help?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, so what we hope to do is to develop what's called a competitive advantage. The advantage that a firm has over its competitors. What is the thing that you do well? Now, in the master's programs, one of the things that you're going to constantly be remarked on, and that talking about competitive advantages, and I'm not sure what other ones you'll have, is one of the things that they'll talk about is do the one thing that you do best and buy everything else. In other words, only focus on your particular core competency that creates strategic advantages or competitive advantages. A strategic competitive advantage is one that cannot be copied because all competitive advantages can. Starbucks has a predominant strategic competitive advantage built in around the lifestyle around their coffee. Starbucks is another company that'll be in the cases. But you do not waste any of your resource. Can anybody tell me where the Nike factories are? It's a trick question. Oregon is correct. They have one location, but Nike owns no factories whatsoever. Nike's core competency, their competitive advantage, is in shoe design and apparel design. That is their focus. Whenever they have a new particular product to go out, they go to the factories in Indonesia or whatever, they ask a request to have a lot group made, and they find out how much, and then they do one more thing. They allow the corporation that is making those particular Nike shoes to do an extended run and allow them to sell that extended run to other suppliers as long as it doesn't have the Nike swoosh, kind of the things that they do the trade on, which means that in many places like H&M or Walmart, you actually might have a Nike shoe with a Nike style, but it just doesn't have the swoosh on it. That's the way Nike does it. That's their competitive advantage. They know these factories all, but they own nothing. Let's just say they don't own anything of any substantial capital that would, in essence, be a drag, or because they want to be fast and loose, and that's the way they play. It is an edge. It serves customers' needs, and it helps to maintain the relationships, and it helps to provide a focus for their entire marketing program. One of the difficulties that, Under Armour had was they had a firm strategic focus when they came out with their wicking, their anti-wicking technology with the goods that they had. Once they got into competition with Nike, then all of a sudden now they're in a bigger space. And so the good question, going back to what you're saying is, excuse me, does their internal abilities, does it match what's required in order to be able to go toe to toe with Nike? My answer is maybe not, but they're giving it their best shot. Okay. I think Under Armour's maybe 1/12 the size of Nike. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, go on. Whatever that specialty is, especially with Under Armour, it's the wicking technology. They need to bring that to just about everything. All right. With Nike, it's apparel. Yes.
Can you give a few examples of external analysis?
An external analysis. Okay, great idea. So I am a shipper. I am shipping 24/7. And all of a sudden, this little thing in 2019 comes along, or in 2020, called COVID. And all of a sudden, the entire external environment gets landed on its head. Think about, so my supply chain people, just-in-time manufacturing. Just-in-time manufacturing basically states that everything has to be at its right place at its right time. All of a sudden, external analysis shows instead of being able to make deliveries once a week, I've got to make deliveries once a month. You've totally disrupted everything. I have no control of that. How do I respond to what's happening externally? That would be an example. Let's also say externally something happens, especially in legal, okay? So forgive me, folks, I do a lot of history. In 1983, the Supreme Court stated that it was legal and acceptable for an individual to record a video program for their own personal consumption. That is an example of an external environment that all of a sudden brings enormous change. Now, all of a sudden, VCRs that are out, video recording devices now come into play. And so now all of a sudden, you've got a brave new world. You can allow recording devices, but which one's going to win? So you've actually got two recording devices. One is the Sony Betamax, and then there's the standard VHS, which is supported by Samsung and some of the other corporations. What's going to win? All right. Sony puts everything they've got into the Betamax, and it is a superior technology for recording, no doubt about it. But the VHS tape has one advantage, and that is it's a 2-hour recording, which means that the VHS tape is more readily usable for being able to watch videos. And so instead of programs or movies coming out in Betamax, they come out in VHS, and the rest is history. The individual analysis says, I'm making a better product, but the world is saying that's not what we want, all right? And I'm not going to tell you the contribution that pornography had to the, advancement of videotape. Anyway, but that's how the world runs, all right? We can do everything we can. We can stake ourselves on one big shot. But if the world isn't ready for it and we haven't studied it, then we have problems. In the 70s, Polaroid came out with the SX70 land camera. It was the first Instamatic where you could take a picture and in 30 seconds, there was the picture. There were others before that. The technology inside the SX70 was pretty good. It had an automatic eye, you had automatic focus, brilliant stuff. Here was the problem, the SX70 cost anywhere from $250 to $275 when external work that they had said that consumers would accept it if it was around $100. And so what happened is this enormously well-made product could not get past its own and external difficulties. And so these are examples. You can't study yourself without studying the environment, and where those two mesh together, you can maximize your resources, then you can achieve success. But you ain't achieving success if customers don't want it, okay? So you develop that professional, that competitive advantage. You think, what is the one thing that I do better than anyone else? And my consumers desire it, and I want it, and I focus myself for it. Give Starbucks every credit because they have been able to achieve something, a real coffee kind of thing But here's the thing, they've been able to achieve it in a competitive advantage that how hard is it to make good coffee if you got the right beans and right equipment? How hard? Not that hard, okay? And yet, even though it's not that hard, Starbucks has lines going out forever. And why? Because they've achieved something unique. It's coffee. But don't tell that to loyal Starbucks drinkers. I hate the thought of spending 15 minutes in a line just for a cup of coffee. And I will go to McDonald's every time, and I am unashamed to say it. Besides, I got to get a Happy Meal for my kids. So, competitive advantage. It's that edge that we need. We serve the customer's needs. We maintain a happy relationship. Those customers are important and they help us to achieve. And so, once I have this competitive advantage, it aligns with hopefully the strategic focus of who I want to serve and how well I want to do it. This is ultimately, hopefully, what brings me success. And so, this leads us to do other things. Holy cow, I've been talking for an hour. All right. So let me make sure I finish this up before we go. The number one thing that you do as marketers, the number one exercise, the most analytical thing we can do is segmentation, targeting, and positioning. As marketing heroes, this is ultimately what we need to do in order to achieve success. We will go into this in chapter 7, but this is what ultimately is the game plan when it comes to achieving the strategy. We identify unique consumer groups. That's segmentation. We put people into unique consumer groups that have common characteristics. They're collectively exhaustive. They're everything that they are and mutually exclusive. They're nothing that they're not. The next thing that they do is we decide, based upon our resources, we decide which of those groups to target. That's second. After our internal analysis, we know our strengths and we know our weaknesses. We want to be able to hit that fine line where everything is. We decide one market or two markets or three markets, or maybe the whole market. We try to identify which groups we can. And the last is positioning, and that is creating a unique place in the consumer mind. And here's the key phrase. This is why we do competitive intelligence relative to the competition. We create a unique place in the consumer mind relative to the competition because we want to do something unique and better. And so after we do this, then we start putting together the marketing program. We think of the product benefits, the consumer needs. We start making appropriate pricing decisions about how we want to go about right pricing this good. Pricing decisions are the most difficult in many ways because they're the easiest to change. It is easy to change price. It is disastrous if you don't know what happens. Place is the most difficult. It requires interactions with outside individuals. It requires months and even years to be able to make those changes. And so that's where they balance. So once we decide our groups, which ones to target, how to create this unique place. All 4 Ps are focused on our position. We're going to distribute the goods to maximize its value relative against the competition. We're going to do next day deliveries. We will do deliveries. So, oh gosh, Newegg is one of my favorite places that's just strictly consumer electronics. And Newegg has 6 warehouse locations across the United States. They're still able to slam hard against Amazon because they allow you to order up to 10 o'clock at night and we'll do next day delivery. So that's an example of a strategic advantage. And so making all these decisions, coming up with a segmentation, we start making the 4 Ps together. This is the part that marketing management says that we have. And then we go about basically branding, positioning. We establish that mental image in the mind of target buyers. And remember, always, always relative to the competition. Always relative to the competition. There is no positioning if you're not positioning against consumers. It's like leaning against a wall that isn't there. We're going to talk about social responsibilities and ethics later. Realize, of course, that ethics are universal standards and moralities tend to be based on the cultures that they're within. It is important for us to be able to maximize the benefit overall of minimizing negative impacts because ultimately we know that consumers care. And so ethics and principles and standards that define our conduct, I don't have to explain much more. Do they do an MBA on ethics? Do they have a class on ethics? See, I had a class on ethics when I took my MBA. I would love for them to do one. I'd teach it. But anyway, just going on. Ethics is knowing what needs to be done that's right and doing it. We will not worry about implementation and control because I think the creative side is more important for you. But I am going to want to talk about developing long-term customer relationships and the switch forever from transactional marketing to relationship marketing, in which basically our desire is to be able to maintain a connection with our consumers so long as we have. Remember that it is context driven, and as the context changes, marketing needs to change with consumers as well. A lot of this stuff we'll talk about in chapter 2 when we talk about the natures of strategy, the building of a mission statement, and how we go about defining the business that we're in. Sounds silly. Most people start businesses and work towards the beginning. It's important to start in your mind first, like Ford did with the big idea. And so these are just simply characteristics of transactional marketing. The transactional marketing, ideally, to think of it, Hyde said that think of it this way. You're going to a place that you've never been before. You're buying gas, paying cash, and you'll never go back again. That is transactional marketing in its basic. But we know quite simply is that consumer desire, if you satisfy needs and wants, consumers are much happier to facilitate the search process by having a heuristic and saying, they've always been good, I'll go there. And so what you hope for is customer retention. You want to be able to have mutual satisfaction between yourself and the consumers. You want to be able to prioritize the service to them, and you want to have frequent contacts with them. It is difficult to achieve because it takes so much time. But ultimately, what you hope for is cooperation, trust, mutual respect. Transactional marketing is basically it. One transaction at a time. That's all that it's there for. And here's the difficulty, if it's only one transaction, one at a time, then you as a marketing organization become obsessed with making them hit that little button as many times as they possibly can, and you're not caring about whether or not what their ideals are. It doesn't help that everything constantly changes. Realize that it's difficult to understand how to maintain all of these things when customer expectations are always growing. That basically customer satisfaction has been declining over years. That also comes with the familiarity with products that they know should be good in a certain way. And the expectation is it's always going to be that way. And of course, consumers are increasingly price sensitive. And especially because your consumer group, as I've said before, many of them are many times the toughest consumer groups that we've ever produced, because you have the one thing that every consumer group needed, and it's knowledge at your fingertips. And that is, in essence, your generation's contribution to all of this is making marketing people have to really tough it out, which is good. It means the best will do well and the worst, well, they'll find something else to do in their lives, okay? So these are the challenges. There's a saying that there is nothing more consistent as change, and they're right. And yes, we have changes in consumer attitudes. We have mature markets right now. I mean, nobody's going to release a new and different phone now. What's left, okay? And the worst part about it is eventually the accountants get connected with everything, and you start cost cutting. And in essence, you may, cut back everything within you that makes you unique and special. So this is kind of a little thing that shows the satisfaction index. And we're going from 95 to 2004. And if you were to look at this thing, you would kind of see it going, like that. Except interesting enough, there are some things that are going on. Did I talk about Walmart getting a 10% bump in satisfaction? Walmart from 2017 to 2018 got a 10% bump in satisfaction. And you know how they did it? They gave every 2.4 million employees a pay raise. Isn't that amazing? You make your employees happier, they'll make customers happier. Okay, we have wrapped chapter 1. I will send you a link. Well, I'll post it on As You Learn, the marketing program. It's all in a couple of videos. Realize this is that the quizzes, once again, are to help you test your own knowledge. I draw the test questions from the quizzes. So I encourage you to do those things. And in the meantime, if you've got any questions or anything from me, please, I will be sitting up a lot. So, if you need to throw me an email, I'll be there somewhere out there to answer, okay? All right, folks, have a great week. I'll see you later.
Hope your surgery goes well.
Thank you much. I appreciate that. I'm